What if I told you that as Jesus hung on the cross, the skies weren't the only thing in turmoil? That, hidden just beyond what human eyes could see, two of heaven's mightiest archangels stood watch, and the entire unseen world held its breath. Michael, heaven's warrior, and Uriel, the blazing flame of God, were not passive observers. They were guardians at the threshold between life and death, light and darkness, heaven and hell. You've heard the story of the crucifixion countless times. The dusty hill, the Roman soldiers, the mocking crowd. But what if there was more, far more happening behind the veil? What if above the screams of men, a cosmic drama unfolded that defies everything we thought we knew? So ask yourself, why did the sky go black at noon? What really happened in the spirit when Jesus' body sagged on the nails? And what were Michael and Uriel doing as the King of Glory gasped his final breaths? Because once you hear what these archangels witnessed and did, you'll never see Calvary the same way again. Chapter 1. The Hidden War over Calvary. Most people imagine the cross from the ground, a hill called Golgotha, a bleeding man between criminals and an angry mob. That's the scene in the physical. But what if you could see beyond the dust and blood, into the spirit? What if right above that hill, a war older than the world itself was raging? At noon, darkness swallowed the sky, not clouds or a passing storm, but a supernatural blackness. For 3 hours, the earth sat under a silence so heavy it felt alive. But this wasn't just about a darkened sun. It was a sign. In the unseen realm, something monumental was happening. Lucifer, the ancient enemy, hovered near the cross in the shadows. He believed he'd won, that this broken, dying man was the end of the prophecy spoken in Eden. The seed of the woman was bleeding, seemingly defeated. But he wasn't the only one watching. Michael, archangel of war, and Uriel, archangel of blazing truth, stood in the skies. They weren't just observers. They were warriors ready to act if heaven willed it. Michael, towering and fierce, his armor glowing with divine fire. Uriel, radiant as the sun, his gaze piercing every darkness. They flanked the spiritual battlefield, guardians over this cosmic turning point. As Jesus struggled under the weight of sin, the air in the unseen dimension grew tense. Angels fell silent. Demons began to slink away, sensing something was wrong. It was too quiet, too calm. And in hell's eyes, that was terrifying. Because they knew power restrained is more dangerous than power unleashed. Jesus could have called legions of angels to end it instantly. He could have destroyed his enemies with a word, but he didn't. And that stillness thundered through the spirit world louder than any roar. Michael's hand clenched around his sword. Uriel's eyes blazed, fixed on Jesus. They knew what humanity could not, that death wasn't taking Jesus. Jesus was giving himself, and in that surrender lay unstoppable victory. Chapter 2. The Silent Command. When Jesus cried out, "Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani," his voice didn't just echo over a Jerusalem hill. It split dimensions. It reverberated into the heart of heaven and the pit of hell. Angels felt it like a shockwave. Demons recoiled, and Michael and Uriel understood. This was the signal. No trumpet sounded, no lightning split the skies. But in that cry was a command deeper than words. Hold the line. Guard what is mine. It was a royal decree spoken from a bleeding king, and it set the heavens into motion. Michael, the general of God's armies, took his place like an unbreakable wall. He wasn't guarding a nation or a city. He was guarding the king himself, and the divine transaction happening on that cross. Every sin, every curse, every lie was being heaped onto Jesus. Hell gathered to watch, desperate to twist the covenant being signed in blood. But Michael stood firm, ensuring nothing interfered. Uriel, the angel of light and secrets, radiated revelation. He held back the darkness of confusion and deception, making sure the truth of what was happening would shine through the ages. He wasn't there to fight with sword and flame, but to anchor heaven's wisdom over the chaos. As Jesus' life slipped away, the earth quaked. But in the spirit, an earthquake of cosmic proportions had already begun. Lucifer's smirk faded, The cross, which he thought was the end of God's plan, was instead its unstoppable climax. Because Jesus wasn't losing, he was conquering. By embracing death, he was about to shatter its grip forever. And Michael and Uriel knew it. They watched with reverence, their swords and flames held steady, because in that moment, when all seemed lost, heaven's greatest victory was being sealed. Where Michael brings war, Uriel brings clarity. He's the angel who takes the deepest secrets of God and shines them into the minds of men and angels. And on that dark afternoon at the cross, Uriel's task was just as fearsome as Michael's sword. Because Jesus wasn't just dying, he was becoming sin itself. Let that sink in. The light of the world was about to step into total darkness. Uriel, burning like a living sun with the fire of God's mysteries, stood watch. He wasn't there to fight, but to make sure the meaning of what Jesus was doing would echo through time, through centuries, nations, and into hearts that hadn't even been born yet. As Jesus' blood dripped onto the earth, Uriel moved. He sent out a wave of divine light, a ripple that would one day awaken Saul on the road to Damascus, inspire gospel writers, and open the eyes of people in corners of the world that didn't even have names yet. Now here's where it gets supernatural, yet rooted in Scripture. The moment Jesus took his last breath, the veil in the temple didn't just tear, it was obliterated. That veil wasn't just expensive cloth, it was the barrier between man and God, a boundary guarded for generations by angelic sentries. For ages, it stood like an unscalable wall, a sign that humanity could never walk into the holy presence of God on its own. But when Jesus died, heaven didn't just allow it. The guardians of that boundary, Michael and Uriel themselves, stepped back. Not in defeat, but in reverence. The Lamb had become the bridge, and the veil no longer needed to stand. Uriel, with holy fire blazing from his being, released one final burst of light, declaring that the separation was over. And somewhere in the realm of spirit, Michael lowered his sword, not because the war was over, but because the battle for access to God had just been won. Pause with me and think. What does it mean that Jesus, even nailed to a cross, was giving commands? What does it mean that heaven's fiercest warriors were not just watching, but actively enforcing those commands as the world jeered him? It means everything. It means that even when you look defeated, even when you feel alone, God's plans for you are still in motion. Heaven isn't watching your life unfold like a movie. It's moving in ways you can't see, commanding angels on your behalf. Because heaven doesn't move by what people say about you. It moves by what God declares over you. And sometimes the most powerful orders are whispered in your pain. Chapter 3. The Descent into Sheol. Jesus took his final breath. The earth shook. Rocks split. The veil tore. But while people stared at a lifeless body on a cross, something unimaginable was happening beneath their feet. Jesus was descending into Sheol, the realm of the dead, and he wasn't going alone. Michael followed. Uriel followed. Not to save him, but to witness what no angel had ever seen. The King of Glory stepping into death itself, uninvited and unstoppable. What is Sheol? It's not the fiery cartoon hell from Hollywood. In the ancient Hebrew world, Sheol was the shadowy place of the dead, a waiting place with separate realms for the wicked and the righteous, with an uncrossable chasm between them. But Jesus wasn't bound by that chasm. He wasn't a victim. He entered carrying our sin, wrapped in the scars of the cross, yet radiating the authority of heaven. When he stepped into Sheol, the entire underworld shook. The ancient fallen ones, the chained giants of the flood, the rebellious spirits cast into darkness. They felt something alien moving through their prison. Lucifer himself, who thought he had finally won, realized too late that he had just let the king into his own gates. Jesus didn't need armies or words. His very presence was a declaration of victory. Behind him walked Michael, burning with righteous fury, and Uriel, glowing with the secrets of God, lighting up the shadows of Sheol. And in that darkness, Psalm 24's prophecy came alive. Lift up your heads, O you gates. Be lifted up, you ancient doors, that the King of Glory may come in. Jesus approached the gates of death, ancient doors older than Rome, older than empires, and he didn't knock. He commanded, "Open." and the gates groaned, not because wood or stone moved, but because every legal chain of sin and death started snapping. The role of Michael wasn't there to fight, he was there to enforce. He was heaven's general standing guard as Jesus claimed what belonged to him, the keys of death and the grave. Michael's presence declared to every spirit in the shadows, this transfer is lawful. There would be no interference, no sabotage, no demonic legal loophole. Heaven's authority was final. The role of Uriel. Uriel, meanwhile, did something staggering. He carried mysteries hidden since the beginning of time. As Jesus descended, Uriel began to unseal these secrets, mysteries even angels longed to understand. In Sheol, Uriel opened a scroll of light, and as he did, the truth of the cross flooded the underworld. The souls of the righteous, Abraham, Moses, David, Elijah, finally saw the promise fulfilled. They saw the Lamb, they saw the light, and they rose. This wasn't just a descent, it was a jailbreak. At the deepest point of death, Jesus reached out his hand, and in the spirit realm, keys appeared. Keys etched not by man, but with the power of eternity, the keys of death and Hades. Lucifer couldn't stop it. No demon dared speak. And when Jesus took those keys, he turned to Michael and simply said, "Time to rise." That's when resurrection began. Not at the empty tomb, but in the shadows of death itself. When chains fell from souls who had waited for ages. When Michael stood as an unbreakable wall. When Uriel unveiled the blazing truth of God's plan. Jesus didn't sneak out of death. He conquered it from the inside out. And when he walked out of that grave 3 days later, he carried with him every soul set free. So hear this. When Jesus hung on the cross, he wasn't abandoned. He wasn't powerless. He was giving silent orders, commanding angels, and overturning hell itself with nothing but his obedience and his blood. Michael stood ready, Uriel burned with revelation, and heaven leaned in. Because when Jesus cried, "It is finished," eternity shifted forever. That means you were never meant to fight your battles alone, even in your darkest moments when you feel powerless and abandoned. God's plan is still alive. Angels are still on assignment. Heaven is still moving. And your silence may hold more power than you realize, because sometimes the greatest victory is won not in your shout, but in your endurance, just like Jesus. So let me ask you, what shook you the most? Was it the angelic war beyond the veil, the invasion of Sheol, or the moment Jesus seized the keys of death? Drop your thoughts below. Don't just watch, join the revelation. And if this opened your eyes, share it, like it, and subscribe, because what's coming next will change everything you thought you knew. Subscribe to this channel for regular updates about the Bible in Philippines.